wa barakatuh. And inshallah, just to make sure, I think everybody can see a video of me and they can also see the screen or my screen or the slide. Is that correct? Can I get confirmation? Alhamdulillah. So we'll do it like this, inshallah. So we'll begin with this slide. So we'll be going through this slide regarding our topic. So our topic of today is the reality of Shirkmas, as we have called it here in the dars. Um, learn the origin, history, and Islamic rulings related to this pagan tradition. So this is kind of what we're going to be going or looking at mostly. We're going to argue that Shirkmas, or known as Christmas, is originally rooted in pagan traditions. Um, and we're briefly going to look at the history of Christmas or Shirkmas, and at the end we will briefly look at some of the rulings related to this festival or this celebration. By the way, is the video of me in the way of the slide? Just want to make sure before we get into it. Okay, so everybody can see the entire slide. Alhamdulillah then. Okay, cool. Great. So here, for example, the first page, everybody can see it correctly. Can somebody confirm, inshallah, before we dive right into it? Okay, great. Alhamdulillah. All good. So, brothers and sisters, obviously the reason why we're doing this, it's not like a secret, right? We're on the 24th. Tomorrow's the 25th. The 25th is known as Christmas, or as we will mostly call it, Shirkmas. Now, let's get into where this word comes from anyway. So this word Christmas, originally, there's somewhat of a khilaf amongst the scholars of history. Originally, they say it comes from a shortened form of the compound phrase Christ's Mass, right? So a mass is like a celebration or a gathering, and Christ obviously is al-Masih, Isa ibn Maryam, Jesus, son of Mary, the great messenger and prophet that the Christians have taken as a Lord, unfortunately. Some also say it may come from Christian Mass, meaning a Christian Mass. So it's similar. And obviously, Christmas is not the correct word for it from a Muslim point of view. In fact, in Arabic, they call it Eid al-Milad. In Arabic, they call it the festival of birth, which is a little bit better. Generally, that's how the ulama they refer to it. Because Christ's Mass is indicating that this is a celebration of Christ, which in reality, as we will see, it's not. So, as Muslims, really, even the word Christmas is not the most accurate wording, even though obviously we may sometimes use it for lack of a better word or for us to be understood. As we will see, there is evidence to support the fact that originally it is a Christian celebration, yes, but originally of pagan origin. And today, to a large extent, it's not even really a religious celebration anymore for most people, but rather it has been commercialized and secularized. So really, that's the reality of Christmas today. So the reason why we're even talking about this is that it's something very widespread throughout the world, especially in the Western world, and not only. And many Muslims may not know the reality of Christmas. So what we hope to do and aim to do is to dive into where all of this really comes from. So really, what we know so far about Christmas and what we have said is that it's on the 25th of December. Now, the first question that pops up in terms of the origins of Christmas is where does this date even come from? So where do we get the 25th of December? Is there something in the Bible? Is there something in the gospel? Is there proof to say that Jesus was born on the 25th of December? Because really, remember, at the end of the day, this is celebrating, as is claimed, the birth of Jesus, son of Mary, alayhi salam. Peace be upon him. Which, the Christians say is God, a'udhu billah. So really, they say this is the birth of Jesus Christ. Now, where did they even get this date? There are mainly two theories. The first one is what we call the calculation theory. The calculation theory means that it may be that some of the early Christian scholars tried to calculate the birth of Jesus, and they came to the conclusion that he was born on the 25th of December. And this is a theory. Um, is there evidence for it or not? Somewhat, but maybe, everybody argues. Some say evidence is flimsy, some say evidence is strong. So it can't really be confirmed, but we know that it's a theory and that some Christian scholars of the past, they tried to calculate the date of birth of Jesus, alayhi salam, and they came to the conclusion of 25th of December, mainly by calculating that he was born on the 25th of March. So 9 months after that would be the 25th of December, according to this research and theory. And then the other theory, which I would argue is probably the main theory, is that the pagan converts to Christianity, so originally a lot of the Christian converts at the beginning of, or in the early stages of Christianity, originally they were pagans. To a certain extent, the same way with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu gave da'wah to mushrikeen, and they became Muslim. So same or similar story with the Christians. However, the difference is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is because he's the last final messenger, and so on. So the message can't be corrupted. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam closed the door to bid'ah, to innovations, and that's why Muslims take such a hard stance against innovations in general, compared to the other religions such as the Christians, maybe the Jews, but to a lesser extent. So more the Christians, they really have an open door to a lot of innovations that have changed the religion throughout time, and that have created different sects and categories and groups. So remember the main converts to Christianity that really exploded the Christian demographic, particularly in Europe, were the converts from the Roman Empire. And for those who don't know the story of the conversion, I guess, of the entire empire mainly, is the story of the Emperor Constantine. Because you have to remember that when Jesus was born and preached and then was supposed to be crucified, and as Muslims we believe that he was not crucified, but that rather Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised him, as is mentioned in the Quran, raised him to the heavens for him to come back and finish his mission, and did not allow him to be crucified. Obviously, the Christians believe that he was crucified. What happened is, Jesus had al-Hawariyun, the disciples. They're like the Sahaba. And these Sahaba of Jesus, they were persecuted by the Roman Empire. Remember, Roman Empire really, along with the Jews, are the ones who really got rid of or tried to get rid of Jesus, of Isa ibn Maryam. So his followers logically are also persecuted. So what happens is they're persecuted, sects are created with time. So because they start, the Christians with time, generation after generation, start asking the question, what is the true nature of Jesus? Is he half man, half God, half angel, half God, half man, half angel, right? Is he just a prophet, which is the original, qawl of the Sahaba of Isa ibn Maryam, which is the qawl of Tawheed. And we have, indications from the Sunnah that these Christians existed to a certain extent up until the arrival of the Prophet ﷺ, even though they were getting lesser and lesser in number. And for those who want the details of this, all they have to do is look at the story of Salman al-Farisi from the Sahaba and how he was a Christian and how he came to Arabia and converted to Islam, and when he met the Prophet ﷺ, and he was awaiting him. And from his story, we gather that throughout the Middle East, and even the story of al-Najashi, from that as well, we gather that throughout the Middle East and Africa, you still had Christians upon the original Tawheed of Isa ibn Maryam. But they were lesser and fewer with time. And what happened is in the year 325, the Roman Empire originally is persecuting Christians. At some points, they tolerate them to a certain extent. But what happens changes the world forever. This didn't happen in 325, happened before. So we're going to get to 325. What we have is the conversion of Emperor Constantine, who was one of the Roman emperors. Now, how did that happen? This is a somewhat not really known from the general people, so you have to look in books of history for this. The Emperor Constantine, he was in battle, and he was losing the battle. He was leading his troops and losing the war, or losing the battle. And he looked up at the sky, and he claims that he saw a cross in the sky, and he saw the wording, right? He saw this vision where he saw the cross and the wording, "Through this you will conquer." So he converted to Christianity on the battlefield and won the battle. And at that point, after this vision, and at that point, he considered himself, or we can consider that he was a sincere Christian convert. But then, as a convert, he is presented with all types of problems, which is, wait a minute, there's all these different aqidah or aqaid. There's all these different beliefs regarding Jesus and creeds. Some say he's half man, half God. Some say half angel, half man. Some say half man, half angel, half God, half angel, and all these things. Some say prophet. Some say not only a prophet, but also has divine nature, and so on and so forth. So Emperor Constantine, he calls for the Council of Nicaea. Now this is in 325, which is the date we're about to get to, or we were getting to. And in 325, he calls for the Council of Nicaea, which is a council where he gathers the Christian scholars and the different nobles and says, okay, now we have to agree on one official aqidah for the Christian religion, one official creed. And they choose the tradition or the manhaj of Paul, which was the manhaj of the Trinity. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, لَقَدْ كَفَرَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ ثَالِثُ ثَلَاثَةٍ. They have disbelieved those who say that Allah is one of three. So this is the Aqidah of the Trinity. This was chosen as the official version of Christianity, which is obviously a false version, which contradicts Tawheed. And this is what was spread throughout the empire. And this became the original or the official Christian religion throughout, Europe, which is basically the Roman Empire. And obviously, at this point, a lot of these people who are converting are Romans that have pagan traditions. And so this history of religions theory, which is the second theory, we said we had the calculation theory, and we have the history of religions theory, which is the second theory. This theory argues that Constantine and the emperors after him still wanted to keep some of their pagan traditions, and that the Romans in general still wanted to keep some of their pagan traditions, and hence they kind of did a mix of like some pagan traditions with some aspects of their Christianity. Basically, they introduced innovations from their pagan religions into the Christian religion, and that's what became official and widespread. So that's the history of religions theory, and it seems to me, and there are more expert people who are more experts on this issue, but it seems to me that this is the more plausible theory and the more logical theory. Allah knows best. But the main point here is that there is no evidence, no clear evidence from the Bible itself that the 25th of December is the birth of Jesus. Okay? طيب. Now, what is the earliest mention of Christmas and the date, the 25th of December? The earliest evidence is found in what we call the chronograph of 354, which the historians generally say was written in 336. So keep in mind, this is in the Roman Empire Christianity. And this is a good while after the death of Jesus. This is a good 350 years or 330 years after Isa alayhi salam. So obviously this is somewhat problematic. Now, so we can see here that, we have no evidence that the early Christians even, first of all, that they even celebrated Christmas or the birth of Jesus in general. And we know that it was, we know that the earliest mention of it is very late after Jesus. And here we have a book called An-Nasraniya, which is written by one of my teachers, Abdurrahman ibn Ghalib Awaji, one of my teachers in the Islamic University of Medina in Aqidah. And he's a scholar of comparative religions and Christianity and Judaism and so on. And I was in university. I wrote a talkhis of his book, meaning a summary of his book. And his book contains a lot of this information. And he mentions here, for example, on the page 354, he mentions a list of festivals and celebrations that he claims, rightly so, that they are innovated by the Christians. And the first he mentions, obviously, is, as we can see here, Eidul Milad. Eidul Milad means the festival of birth, i.e. Christmas, which he says, it's a day in which the Christians claim to celebrate the birth of Jesus, alayhi salam, and they go to church and do extra prayers and so on and so forth. And as we mentioned, he also mentions here, and the first mention that we have of this in history is in a Roman chronicle in the year 336, as we mentioned. And it only really after that became officially, with time, it officially became known as the Christmas celebration on the 25th of December. And it got more popular over the centuries. And see here that I mentioned with the picture here, the Roman winter solstice is on the 25th. So this is where we get the history of religions theory, that the Romans, they were already celebrating on the 25th what they call the birth of the sun. The sun, S-U-N, right? And then they switched it to the birth of the Son of God, S-O-N, referring to Isa alayhi salam, to Jesus. Because in pagan times, they were celebrating or they were worshiping the sun as one of their deities. And in fact, the more you research, the more you can see that the 25th of December is actually the birth of a lot of the ancient pagan deities that sometimes have a link to the sun, such as, for example, Horus, which is considered to be the sun god, and such as, for example, Mithras, which is considered to be like a Persian type of sun god or something similar. Al-Muhim, all of these show that there are pagan roots to specifying the 25th of December. Then we have the calculation theory, some, out of knowledge, respect for the research and knowledge of the other qawl, basically. I mentioned here that, look, there is some value to the calculation theory, but it's probably, it's not as logical as the history of religions theory. So here we have a whole paper that argues more for the calculation theory, keeping in mind that even this paper mentions that, as you can see here, that even the calculation theory is not that strong anyway. Now, then we move on. So more from the history of religions theory, we have, for example, here in the Holman Illustrated Bible Dictionary, that in Rome, the feast of the unconquerable sun celebrated the beginning of the return of the sun, like the rebirth of the sun. When Christianity became the religion of the empire, the church either had to suppress the festivals or transform them, doing basically innovation. The winter solstice seemed an appropriate time to celebrate Christ's birth. Thus, the festival of the sun became a festival of the sun, S-O-N, the light of the world. Yani, this is how they called Jesus and so on. So they kind of switched it. And this makes sense also from the point of view that as new converts, to keep in line, the people of the Roman Empire and the converts that have converted from paganism to Christianity, you still kind of have to give them, some compromise for the transition from paganism to Christianity to be smooth. So this is also logical from that point of view. So it would make sense that there would be like these transitional, these transitional aspects where they would kind of mix both religions for people to, for the Roman people to accept the religion of Christianity more easily. Now, if you look at some of the views from the Bible scholars, and if we go into more depth regarding Christian studies, you'll find a lot of opinions from the Christians themselves that there is really no basis for the 25th, and that it is based in a pagan ritual and festival, such as here. So we have here from this book, Original Bible Truth, some of the quotes regarding Christmas. Such as this quote from the New Catholic Encyclopedia that states, Christmas originated at a time when the cult of the sun was particularly strong at Rome. And this theory finds support in some of the church fathers contrasting the birth of Christ and the winter solstice. So they mixed both festivals, or they transformed the winter solstice into a Christian festival, rather. So they say, this remains a theory. It's hard to prove 100%. It's hard to prove without a shadow of a doubt. So they say, though the substitution of Christmas for the pagan festival cannot be proved with certainty, it remains the most plausible explanation for what? For the dating of Christmas. This is the New Catholic Encyclopedia. You also here have an interesting quote from James Hastings, a Bible scholar. And he says, most of the Christian customs now prevailing in Europe or recorded from former times are not genuine Christian customs. Rather, what he means is that they're innovation. Then he says, but rather heathen customs. Heathen means kafir, disbeliever, disbeliever customs, which have been absorbed or tolerated by the church. So the church was not clear and fierce in their rejection of innovations. We have here from another passage from the Catholic Encyclopedia, an older version in the volume 10. It's mentioned, so again, Origen, which is one of the Bible scholars, early Christian scholars, that have had evidently some similar thought before him when he insists that all of the holy people in the scriptures, no one, this is very interesting. He says, no one is recorded to have kept a feast or held a great banquet on his birthday. Meaning the early Christians did not celebrate, or at least we don't have evidence that they celebrated the birth of Jesus or did anything regarding his birth. And look at this. He says it is only sinners like Pharaoh and Herod, tyrants, Tawarit, who make great rejoicings over the day on which they were born into this world below. So he says, he actually passes a fatwa saying that all types of birthdays is basically nothing, it's not the path of the believers, basically, from his point of view, which, to be honest, we accept is correct. And from a purely spiritual aspect, without even looking at the rulings, if you look at the traditions of the pagans and the traditions of prophets, and their followers, you will notice that birthdays and celebrating birth was really only found in traditions of pagans and was never really found in the traditions of prophets. So up to you what you want, which path you want to choose. طيب. Now, what about, so we've talked about the 25th of December and the most plausible theory regarding the origin of the date. What about the various Christmas traditions? Where do they come from? Again, here you have various theories. For example, we have evidence, or theories at least, that decorations is originally, or decorating for a celebration is originally a pagan ritual. So we have here Christian decorations are mentioned in ancient descriptions of the Roman feast Saturnalia. And if you go even further, you'll see that all types of pagans from all over the world used to decorate in favor of their deities. You have here a quote very interesting as well from Pope Gregory the Great, 6th century. And he says that, or rather, this is from Bede, an English monk, rather. He records that English pagans had celebrated the start of their year at the winter solstice and called it the Night of the Mothers. So he says that pagans had celebrated the start of the year at the winter solstice, meaning the 25th. You have also the tradition of Yule, a winter festival observed by Germanic peoples that was incorporated into Christmas during the Christianization of the Germanic peoples. Again, you always have this theory of pagan reverts to Christianity, bringing in some of their shirk from their previous religions, or from their previous religions. So, for example, the Christmas tree has roots, can be traced back to Yule, to this festival, and can also be traced back to other Germanic and Latvian pagan traditions. What about the origin of Santa Claus and the reindeers and all these things? There's evidence and theories that trace Santa Claus back to Odin. Odin, which is one of the deities of the Viking religion or the Scandinavian religions, of the Norse mythology and religion. And so here there are links made between Odin and Santa. Why? Because the Norse god, i.e. Odin, delivered gifts with an 8-legged flying horse, just like Santa with the reindeers. Right? And many argue, that, Santa Claus, the modern day Santa Claus, is based in Norse mythology. Santa Claus is also linked to Saint Nicholas, a Christian saint. And those who know anything about, those who know things about how it works when it comes to saints know that there's a lot of shirk involved. So really Saint Nicholas is considered to be the original figure of Santa Claus. That he would give, Saint Nicholas would give gifts and so on and so forth. And because he's a saint, they would pray to him, which is shirk, for gifts and help and so on and so forth. And that eventually became Santa Claus, who gives gifts to children on the 25th. Other pagan legends that are linked to Santa Claus, we have the Italian legend of La Befana. And as an Italian, I'm half Italian on my mother's side. I know about this very well. When I was a kid, you'd hear these legends, and in Italy and so on. So La Befana is an Italian legend or folklore about an old woman that's a witch that goes around dropping candies, and on her, she flies around dropping candies and presents and so on. Close to the date of around the date of the 25th, around that period. And they also link it to Christian, to Christian legends as well. That somehow she has a link to Jesus and so on, which is obviously is false. So obviously we see in La Befana we see also some aspects of Santa Claus. So that's really, a summary of some of the origins of these traditions and so on. Now let's move on really quickly to some of the rulings related to Christmas for us as Muslims. Now that we've understood the history and the origins, that we've established that Christmas is problematic and rooted in pagan tradition, how do we, act regarding Christmas, or rather, I should say, Shirkmas? Because really, it's not the Mass of Christ. It's not the celebration of Christ. Really, at the end of the day, what it really is a celebration of Shirk. So really, it should be called Shirkmas to us Muslims. So we have the question of the ruling on a Muslim celebrating, participating, or congratulating on the occasion of Christmas or of Shirkmas. And unfortunately, some of these fatwa that have come out recently are confusing people and telling them, no, it's fine. You're allowed to say Merry Christmas and so on. And we know that many popular figures, celebrities and so on, Muslim celebrities, sometimes show themselves celebrating Christmas, such as Muhammad Salah. And that he has been heavily praised for this by many of the non-Muslims, or the people who their religion is being tolerant. But he's also been obviously criticized, and probably more criticized than anything else, by the Muslims. For as a Muslim celebrating Christmas, a'udhu billah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide him and us, and to guide as well those who give these types of fatwa. Ameen ya Rab. But these types of fatwa and these portrayals of Muslims celebrating Christmas is very dangerous. If we look at some of the hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, as narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, surely you will follow the ways of those before you. Naam. How? In everything, as one arrow resembles another. So much so that if they entered a hole of a lizard, you would also enter it, meaning that the Prophet ﷺ is prophesying. He says, حتى لو دخلوا جحر ضب تبعتموهم. Yani you would do everything they would do. So this is why we have, for example, people not only celebrating Christmas, but also celebrating Maulid and making that like a big deal, just as the Christians, making the birth of the Prophet a big deal, and also same thing, by the way, brothers and sisters, just like a general principle. It's very hard to confirm dates of birth in ancient times and in pre-medieval times, because people didn't record them. It was not culture in general to record the date of birth. If anything, they would record the date of death. But the date of birth was not really important to the scholars and historians and people at the time. And this is why we're not really sure of the exact day on which the Prophet was born. We know the year, but that's pretty much as far as it goes. We know the day, that it was a Yom al-Ithnain, a Monday. But as for the exact date, was it the 12th, the 8th, the 10th? There's the different aqwal, and there's nothing for sure. Same goes for Jesus and so on. We can't say for sure he was born on the 25th. And it wouldn't really make sense, according to Christian tradition, that he would be born in a manger, which is like a little farmhouse, in the middle of winter. As a baby, he would be, and even the way people are dressed, they would be very cold and so on. So there's always ways to criticize it from that aspect as well. So the process that I'm saying, you will do everything they do, meaning that there will always be groups of Muslims who will try to follow in the footsteps of the Christians and the Jews, to the point where if they enter the hole, or if they enter the hole of a lizard, you would also enter it. And the Sahaba said, قلنا يا رسول الله اليهود والنصارى قال صلى الله عليه وسلم فمن. The Sahaba said, do you mean, O Messenger of Allah, the Jews and the Christians, or the people of the book? And he said, who else? And this is a walk there. This is what's going on right now. This is what we can see. that unfortunately many Muslims are following the people of the book and everything that they do. If they do birthdays, some of us do birthdays. If they celebrate Christmas, not only do we celebrate Christmas, we celebrate Mawlid. If they dress a certain way, we want to dress the same way, and so on and so forth. The Prophet ﷺ also says, "Man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa minhum." Whoever imitates a people is from them or is one of them. Um, and this is even more clear because this hadith is to be studied. يعني it has a sharh, it has explanations to understand what do we consider tashbih or tashabbuh. What do we consider tashabbuh? What do we consider imitating? Okay, so this is not the time for that. This could necessitate its own dars. But what is for sure is that imitating the disbelievers in their religious traditions is tashabbuh. 100%. You can argue other things that are non-religious, such as, wearing a certain type of clothing and so on and so forth. That's very open to debate. And that's not always clear. There are some instances of that are clear. But when it comes to religious traditions, there's no khilaf and no debate, to be honest, because you're imitating something that is specific to them, which is their religious traditions. من تشبه بقوم فهو منهم. نعم, narrated by Abu Dawood, and the Sahabi that reports it is Abdullah ibn Umar. From the Fatah, we have, for example, the Fatwa ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. In Al-Fatawa al-Kubra, he says, لا يحل للمسلمين أن يتشبهوا بهم في شيء مما يختص بأعيادهم ولا من طعام ولا لباس ولا اغتسال ولا إيقاد نيران. He says it is not allowed for the Muslims to imitate the disbelievers in anything that they do from their celebrations, from that is specific to them, from their clothing that is specific to only them, from their foods that are specific to only them, and so on and so forth. And he says, you're not allowed to give gifts on such a day to imitate them, and you're not allowed to sell to them to help them in their festivals, because that would be tacit approval of what they're doing. And you shouldn't make children play and celebrate on such a day that would end up in being an imitation of their celebration. And he says, you should not take any of the symbols of the people of Kufr on these days, of the days of their festivals. And he says, بل يكون يوم عيدهم عند المسلمين كسائر الأيام لا يخص المسلمون بشيء من خصائصهم. And this is very interesting and very important. Ibn Taymiyyah says, rather, the day of their festivals to a Muslim is like any other day. So tomorrow on the 25th, people are going to be celebrating, people are going to be doing this, doing that, Christmas tree. To us, it's just a regular Monday. Now, so this is how the Muslim needs to act in these times, because obviously we don't agree, and we don't approve of their celebrations. This doesn't mean that we disrespect them in public, or that we do that. This doesn't mean being violent and so on and so forth. This is another topic, and it's not from the akhlaq and the adab of the Muslim to take these matters into his own hands in the lands of the non-Muslims in the first place. It's their lands. So we don't have the authority to do anything in terms of stopping their celebration and so on. But we have the authority to believe what we want to believe and to approve of what we want to approve, and we're not forced to approve of any of their celebrations. And to be honest, if we were forced to do so, then that would mean that hijrah would become obligatory from the lands of non-Muslims if it's not already. And that's a whole other debate and discussion. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah, in his book Ahkamu Ahl al-Dhimma, he says, as for congratulating the non-Muslims on their festivals, فحرام بالاتفاق. This is haram by agreement of the scholars. Such as saying Eid Mubarak alayk. Have a good holiday or festival. Or like Merry Christmas. نعم, and he says, subhanallah, فهذا إن سلم قائله من الكفر فهو من المحرمات. He says, and even if a person says these things like happy holiday, happy festival, Merry Christmas, he says, even if a person has been saved from kufr for whatever reason, then whatever the case may be, if he has been saved from kufr, at the end of the day, it's still haram. And he says, and this is scary, and he says, وَهُوَ بِمَنْزِلَةِ أَنْ يُهَنِّهُ بِسُجُودِهِ لِلصَّلِيبِ. And this is the same as congratulating somebody for doing sujood, for doing sujood and bowing to the cross. بل ذلك أعظم إثما عند الله. And that's one of the grave sins in the sights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the gravest of sin, because that's worse than congratulating them for drinking alcohol or killing somebody or doing zina and so on. This is what he says here in the book. Subhanallah. So that's why, and this is the general principle regarding Christmas. And we might have, especially in the Q&A, we might get into some of the more detailed questions and rulings. But the general principle is that whatever you do and whatever you say, you can't approve of the festival. Okay, this is the general principle. Which obviously, this is not hard in of itself, because no Muslim really approves of kufr and shirk and so on. And we know that what they say about Jesus regarding the fact that he's the son of God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about this in the Quran many times, about the gravity of attributing to Allah a son. For example, in Surah Yunus, قالوا اتخذ الله ولدا سبحانه هو الغني له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض. That they say Allah has a son. Allah has taken a son. Glory be to Allah. Rather, He is the Al-Ghani, meaning the independent. He depends on nobody. He has no links to anybody. Yani no associates. Rather, He is unique and alone as an ilah that is deserving of worship. And rather, He owns everything that is in the heavens and the earth, because He is the creator. So it's very grave to attribute to Allah a son. So when they celebrated the birth of the Son of God, and you say Merry Christmas, that's like you saying happy celebration of the birth of the Son of God. So it's forbidden for a Muslim to say Merry Christmas. And if it's not kufr, it's definitely haram, depending on the situation and the context. We also understand that the celebration of Christmas or Shirkmas is an issue of al-wala wal-bara. So for example, in this book, Al-Wala wal-Bara fi al-Islam, Al-Wala wal-Bara fi al-Islam, written by Shaykh al-Qahtani, Muhammad al-Qahtani, he mentions that it's not allowed, according to many opinions, for the people of the book in Muslim lands to openly celebrate these shirk festivals like Christmas. And this is the ittifaq, the ijma' of the Sahaba. Yeah, he claims an ijma' of the Sahaba and the Fuqaha. So if that's the case for the people of the book in Muslim lands, then what about the Muslims? How are they allowed to celebrate this? And keep in mind, in some Muslim countries, Christmas is celebrated openly. SubhanAllah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us. And there is aqwal of Umar and so on from the Sahaba that tell us to be aware of being like the mushrikeen, especially on the days of their Eid, lest the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fall upon us. طيب, now we move on to the question, of accepting Christmas gifts. So we know that it's haram to give Christmas gifts. So for example, if you were to give a gift tomorrow for the occasion of the 25th of December, i.e. Christmas or Shirkmas, then that would be haram uncategorically. Or categorically rather. Or is that how they say it? I forget. Al-Muhim, it's haram by consensus. But what about receiving them? Here, the hukm may be different. Now you have many of the contemporary ulama. You will find fatwa such as Ibn Jibreen, fatwa of Ibn Jibreen, Ibn Uthaymeen, and there, if I remember correctly, there's also a video of Shaykh al-Fawzan where they say you shouldn't accept gifts on Christmas. If somebody gives you a gift, because they argue that this equals approving of the festival if you accept a gift. So it seems that many of the modern ulama are very strict on this issue. You will find, however, from the Salaf, more lenient opinions, such as Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. He says, أما قبول الهدية منهم يوم عيدهم فقد قدمنا عن علي رضي الله عنه أنه أتي هدية النيروز فقبلها. Ibn Taymiyyah says that for accepting a gift from the kuffar on the day of their celebrations or festivals, we have quoted above that Ali ibn Abi Talib was brought a gift on the occasion of the Nairuz celebration, which is a celebration of the Majus, the Mushrikeen. And he accepted it. And we have another quote from the same book, page right after, regarding Ibn Abi Shayba and his narration regarding a woman who asked Aisha, we have some wet nurses from the Majus, the Mushrikeen of the Majus, and they have a festival in which they bring us gifts. She said, as for what is slaughtered for that day, do not eat it, but eat from their vegetables. Meaning that Aisha, according to this narration, said that you can, to a certain degree, accept the gift of the kuffar on the day of their celebrations. And the way this is argued as well, and this seems to be a strong position, it's from the Salaf, is that just because you accept a gift doesn't mean you approve of their festival. Remember, what did Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah say? The day of their festival, the day of the 25th, for example, is a regular day. It's just another day for the Muslim. So if they give you a gift, the asl of accepting a gift from the kuffar is that it's halal. So based on the asl and based on the fact that for you it's a regular Monday, then it's allowed to accept their gifts, however, with conditions. And you'll find here, these conditions on, for example, this fatwa here on Islam question and answer, Islam QA. That number one, this gift should not be meat that has been slaughtered for the festival. This is the first condition. Number two, it should not be something that may be used to help in imitating them on the day of their festival, such as candles, eggs, palm leaves. So basically, you're not allowed to accept like a gift of like a baby Jesus or like a Santa, stuff like this. Because that would enter into imitation, because it's very specific. But if they give you a random gift and so on, that has no particular specific link in and of itself to the symbolism of the festival, then according to this opinion that is based in the actions of the Salaf, then that's allowed, but not if it contains the symbolism of the celebration. He also mentions the importance of al-wala and bara that we should have, and that the gift, if accepted, should not be with the aim of approving of the festival, but rather the intention should be of softening the hearts to Islam and so on and so forth. Because, a lot of people, if you don't accept their gift, especially if the conditions are okay, according to these conditions, if you don't accept their gift, they'll take it personally. Now, again, so basically, like if accepting it would basically also be a way of of leaving the door open to da'wah and so on and so forth. Keeping in mind that accepting it does not necessarily mean that you approve of it. But this really, some brothers and sisters would prefer to follow the opinions of some of these modern ulama, and that's fine as well. And that's the safer opinion, especially in our times, and Allah knows best. But in general, brothers and sisters, when it comes to Christmas and so on, like we said, the main principle is that we should beware of anything that shows approval of the festival and so on. So that's really what it comes down to as a main principle, and that it should be a regular day. Now I wanted to say something else, but I forgot. It might come back to me, inshallah. Now, now keep in mind that Christmas nowadays, people will pressure you. Oh yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to mention. Also wanted to mention when you like reject saying Merry Christmas, somebody might say Merry Christmas, and you like don't say it back, or you say something else. Basically you don't respond, or if you're in a situation where you refuse to accept a gift, a lot of people will take this personally. So it's important as well in the da'wah to try and explain things, to do things with manners, and explain that this is not like personal, this is not against you. A lot of people won't understand it the way they won't see it the way we see it. Like they don't understand a lot of these things we're speaking about right now. So it's also up to us to kind of clarify and be like a type of education role and be on our good behavior for the da'wah and say like, look, this is not like personal, these are our beliefs, like we can't contradict our beliefs, we have certain convictions, it's not like against you personally, and so on and so forth. I don't want, and you shouldn't take it bad, and so on and so forth. This type of talk might make a person understand on the other end that okay, if that person has his beliefs and so on, like I'll respect that. But we have to like be clear, because a lot of times people understand it like this and they really just take it personally if you don't say it back. Like if you don't say it back Merry Christmas, or if you refuse to accept a gift. You have to like basically be nice about it. And in many cases be like kind of like joking about it or laughing about, like basically be like light-hearted about it, even though obviously these are very serious subjects. But for the akhlaq and the da'wah, you can kind of be light-hearted about it, like, oh, don't take it personally, but these are against my beliefs, like with a smile and so on. Like you shouldn't be strict and tough, because this at the end of the day, is counterproductive in the da'wah. So you don't have to be angry or mad or strict when it comes to the da'wah. You can say the haqq with a smile and good manners. Now keep in mind, then we'll end on this, that Christmas or Shirkmas, really at the end of the day, especially nowadays, it's really just a secular celebration for most. Like most don't even really link it to any religion, to Christianity or um and it definitely has a commercial aspect. So there's an economic aspect, there's a marketing aspect when it comes to Christmas. So the point of this is to say that in many cases, um this is not even a religious celebration for many, which means that they might pressure you into following something. And your line of defense is always that, hey, this is not like this is like a secular celebration, basically. And that we as Muslims, we only first of all, we don't celebrate other festivals of other religions due to our convictions. And on top of that, we don't celebrate secular festivals or celebrations. And really, at the end of the day, our main line of defense is that we are very strict when it comes to our celebrations, and we only have two celebrations. According to the Sunnah and the Ahadith, the Prophet was clear on this, that we have two Eids, Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. And in reality, we shouldn't be celebrating anything else. Now, if you look at the economic, and this is why Christmas is so pushed, it's not even about religion for the most part, but it's really for the economy. and for marketing and for companies to make a lot of money. So you see here that a random person or average person in Canada spends $2,000 on Christmas to buy food, decorations, gifts, and so on. So if your entire population is spending $2,000, economically, that's pretty good for you as a country. And specifically, it's pretty good for the companies more than the average people. The marketing companies and so on, and anybody who has something to sell. Um, and again, to us, the economy is not our main objective. Our main objective is pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no matter what the economy says. But a lot of people, they will have this point of view, and they will be pushing Christmas for these reasons, for secular reasons and economic reasons. And we'll end here, inshallah ta'ala. And I'll open the floor for Q&A, bismillah.